Hello and welcome to I Want to Grow, and I Want to Grow is all about that, right? It's all about our growth. But today is a special day because we're celebrating the British Council, and they've been operating now for 90 years, and they're pretty special. The ripples they're doing, the ripples that they're creating in different people's lives is quite phenomenal. So today we have Sebastian with us. Sebastian, welcome to the podcast and welcome to the celebration.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
Tell me, let's start with you as an individual. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
All right. It's kind of a tricky question. As Mab mentioned before, I wear quite a few hats. But if I were to define myself, I'm an arts and culture worker with a particular interest in public art. Something I kind of recently connected dots on and realized it just kind of runs deep in my family. So when I was a kid, I grew up in the studio of my father's cousin, who was an artist back home in Colombia and Latin America, who was particularly interested in monumental pieces and large-scale pieces. And looking in retrospect, that must have affected what I'm interested in, because that's what I do today, just dealing with these monumental
And it's
things.
great you bring that subject up because, like with all our guests they've got so much history, and all of a sudden something defines them, and they move into something that they've quite different sometimes to what they were thinking that they were going to do, but they go into something a little bit different than they ever anticipated. What is your story? How did you define you? How were you defined? As you said your uncle. You went into a studio, but how did that journey then progress from there?
Well, my background is in architecture and urbanism. Ever since school, I was more interested in horizontal things than vertical things. Buildings weren't much of an attraction for me. I was more interested in the city. The city, the sidewalks, parks, where life actually happens. And got interested in landscape architecture and urbanism, just continuing this kind of more outdoors and urban dimension of the discipline. And from there, and my interest in art, I'm also a practicing artist myself, and it was kind of I wouldn't say a natural progression, but the paths ended up kind of coalescing in this common point where public art happens in the city for the city, and I have this background that has been both a bit of a weight and an asset. It's just like being able to see things maybe too much as an architect, but that also has its perks. Yeah. So I arrived to this place where I feel pretty comfortable, where my interest, my skills, and my experiences kind of come together, and this is a field that both makes me happy, and I'm pretty convinced I'm good at it.
Yeah, I think you are too. One of the things I would say, we're in Qatar right now. It must be something. Sometimes it's like a blank canvas. So you're creating something new in certain areas. What has it been like here in Qatar for you with this whole journey of yours? It must be quite exciting.
Well, I like to think that no place is a blank canvas. Like as you were saying, we all have our journeys, and so do places. So these places come a long way, maybe through different paths that those we maybe in the West are more familiar with. But this place has a wealth of history and like even from the natural and even geologic perspective, and so but it is indeed a fascinating playing field. It's a place that's through its institutions, it's putting a lot of effort in every single front, and it's a huge privilege to be part of what's happening here. It's specifically in public art and urban development and placemaking and so on and so forth. There is a lot of things happening. This city feels pretty much alive in real time. We see the changes happening, sculptures popping up, bridges opening, tunnels, and like soon after, like murals following these infrastructure changes, and it's very much alive.
Yeah,
And it's sometimes it's hard to keep up, but it's also great to be part of such a dynamic environment.
I love and you were correct. It's definitely not a blank canvas, but the way you explained it is a field of opportunity.
Totally.
It's so many cultures coming together, so many
Indeed.
people learning from one another. It is quite remarkable. Where I like with the people that we've spoken to already, and obviously yourself, it's like you're kind of having to push some boundaries sometimes in what you are implemented within those communities, within that art perspective, and it's getting people to buy into what your thoughts and processes are. And I suppose that's also listening to one another. That's another thing that I've noticed, is everybody's listening to everybody's perspective, and that's quite exciting. Now, in saying that, let's go on to these crossovers now with the British Council. Can you tell us a little bit of the experiences you've had with those memorable experiences that you've worked with, and those ripples that it's been creating?
Right. I often say that more than anything, I ended up just being a translator. Not only through cultures, but through disciplines. Art making now more than ever, and specifically the field of public art is inherently interdisciplinary. So I often have to interface with people from different walks of life, from the audience, the installer, the curator, the artists themselves. And they all often come from different places, and they see things through different lenses. And, institutions as well, like the British Council. So I often find myself speaking artist to the artist, engineer to the engineer, and even in a diplomatic way to the bureaucrats and the cultural workers and so on and so forth. So it's an exercise in mediation, and that's what I think.
It seems like a tightrope you're walking.
Well, not much, because I think the goal is clear. Like, I think we're all kind of aiming towards the same.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like how where are we standing in the whole equation, the whole field. And that's where I think that the institutions like the British Council are very valuable, because, as I say, this is an interdisciplinary exercise, and the more players we have, the better. So it's great to have the government sector, which I work for, Qatar museums. It's good to have the the more commercial side of things, galleries. Without galleries, there is no art market. Without art market, artists don't make a living. And it's fundamental to have independent cultural institutions like the British Council that enter in the equation in a part of the field that's, let's say, less defined, more fluid, because they are not the government. They are not for profit. And it's really interesting because cultural institutions, independent cultural institutions, can afford to take agile and bold decisions and push the boundary a bit, yeah, and venture into new things. And that's been my experience with the British Council. I've participated in a few projects, wearing different hats again. I was commissioned a piece, a video piece within the open call for an exhibition called The Place I Call Home. A few years back, I collaborated with a dear friend and a brilliant photographer, Abby Green, who was based here. And so the conversation with the British Council was quite interesting. That was also a collaboration with the photo gallery, Welsh institution, right? If I'm not wrong. And the conversation was very interesting because we actually, even though she's a photographer, this was a photography exhibition, I wasn't particularly interested in photography at the moment in my personal practice. So we went ahead and we just took the plunge and said like, hey, how about for your photography exhibition, we don't do photography, we do video. It will be a bit of a slow-moving photography. It will be a video piece. It's still image-based, just add the time and sound dimensions, and they were very receptive. British Council was like, okay, let's do this. And it turned out into a beautiful piece I'm very fond of. And it was quite a broad-reaching exhibition. It was all over the UK. All the
Europe, I believe, and the Middle East, I believe.
It was shown in the UK, in like all the UK capitals,
Yeah.
and all the GCC countries.
Yes.
Then that piece, like from my side, had a further life. It was shown in Paris and Berlin. Anyway, so the piece like continued its journey. And so it's fantastic to have like
that
this.
That particular one had such an effect on individuals. It was crazy.
Indeed. It was an interesting show, and I actually learned a bit of a fun story recently. I've been working with closely with someone from MATAF Modern Art Museum, Arab Modern Art Museum. She recently joined the team. She's originally Bahraini Lebanese. She was based in Bahrain, and we were having a conversation the other day here at M7 actually, and she mentioned like, since we met, I've been trying to piece together where I've seen you before. And she was recently in Bahrain, and it was taking some things out of her old office. And she said, like, and I came across a catalog from this exhibition, The Place I Call Home. So I've seen you there. I've seen the stills of your video. Those were laying in my office for months. And so apparently she was familiar with the piece, familiar with my face, but we haven't pieced that together. So like this is like, one of those kind of serendipitous connections, if you will, like Beirut, Bahrain, the UK, Doha, Colombia, like, the piece was also shown in Colombia. And so, like these little subtle connections that at the end impact on other things we work.
I love these ripple effects, the things that you do that has a major effect on people's lives. And sometimes the person that started those ripples don't realize the extent of what their work has done. which is true testament to what the British Council does, I think. Those other things that you've been involved with the British Council, what are those things that you've been doing with them as well?
Right, the other hats. I wrote my master's dissertation on public art, specifically in the case of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia between 1968 and 1986, which is, a small parenthesis, probably one of the most, if not the most, ambitious modern public art initiatives in the world. It's fascinating. Many people doesn't know about it, but that city has fantastic modernist pieces, Calders, Miros, Moors, fantastic artworks. A lot of regional artists are present in that public art collection, and so the British Council published a few. Speaking of unseen ripples, actually, the British Council did a research on public art a survey of public art in the GCC region. That must have been 2015, 14, something like that. And they issued some essays, a set of small publications about Qatar, Saudi Arabia, I think the Emirates as well. And so those were a relevant source of information, kind of helped me pave the way into my research. So again, unseen ripples, probably the writers of those pieces have no idea. Well, they must have learned when I cited the text in my bibliography. But
and I'm going to jump in here before, I know there's another one that you want to talk about, but what drew you to the Middle East?
I guess chance and wanderlust, I guess. I am originally from Colombia, and growing up, my country had a troublesome history in the 80s and 90s particularly. So when I was growing up, my family moved around trying to steer away from now infamous situations. Gladly quite in the past now. Things are so much better. But I grew up moving a little bit around. So I've never been particularly rooted to a place. 2008, I was working at a landscape architecture studio back home and teaching at a university also in the same field. And former colleague of mine calls me from Dubai and says hey, I remember you wanted to move from Medellin, that's the city where I'm from, and I had something lined up in Bogota. I was Doha is a little bit farther away from Bogota, but would you be interested? And I was like, what's to do out there? And then the Sidra Hospital was still on the design process. That company was working on that project. And I was like, we have this interesting project with Cesar Pelli, who's the architect of the Sidra Hospital. And there is a Damien Hirst commission on the pipeline. And that all sounded fantastic to me.
Wonderful.
Within weeks, I was packing up and moving in this direction, knowing I have to shamefully accept my knowledge of the region was very limited. So I came with very little preconceptions, other than unfortunate things you see in the news, but also the portraits on films. And I came to find that there was way more than that. And so I came here. I'm Latin American. We do have a strong, bit far-fetched connection, but or like meandering connection, maybe it's a more accurate word, with the Arab culture through, the Arabs moving into North Africa, then to the south of Spain, the Spaniards coming into Latin America. Uh, Even though it's been several cultures across kilometers and hundreds of years, a lot of these things still, these connections are still quite noticeable. And, coming here felt familiar somehow in very unexpected ways.
The way you're speaking, it seems like your second home, the Middle East. It seems like
It's home. It's home. I've been here for, over 15 years. I've come and gone. I haven't been here continuously since 2008. I've left Qatar thinking it was for good a few times and ended up coming back.
Keeps on pulling you back.
Yeah, indeed.
Awesome.
And at this point, most of like a significant, more than half of my professional life has happened here. I've built a family here. I have a Middle Eastern dog. I have a Saluki. I have beautiful friends, beautiful friends. I've made meaningful projects and connections and collaborations, and I think I will never really fully leave the Middle East. I might not be physically here, but what I've built here will stay, and those connections will continuously will
Being
pull
here
me
forever,
back
yeah.
here.
That tapestry, how do you think again, coming back to the British Council, it sounds like you've had a wonderful journey. It sounds like you've enjoyed every second. I can
Not every second. That's hardly possible. But
the where I was going there, it seems like you haven't. I was gonna say you're non-stop. It's kind of always going. There's no kind of, there doesn't seem to be any rest for you.
it's called neurodivergence. I struggle with that. I was diagnosed with ADHD a few years ago, and it all made a lot of sense ever since. So yeah, I guess the whole thing of playing in different fields, dabbing in different levels of the whole practice of art and public art, being on the academic side, on the practical and technical side, being being an artist, sometimes doing curatorial work is, it's driven by a curiosity understanding the way our brain works. It's anything but a superpower,
I love calling these things superpowers because we've all got them.
Yeah, it's a matter of understanding how you function as a person, even from the chemical perspective, how your brain works, and try to navigate things from there. And as I said, there is nothing is black and white, and it hasn't always been easy, but looking in retrospect, it's been a beautiful journey. And going back to maybe this other thing we did with the public, with the British Council, was this conference on public art. It's called Outside the Box, and again tying that in with connections and how things ramify. My participation in that was through my experience on public art, and I was kind of on the back end, and I ended up on stage participating on a panel as well, but that's something else. So I was kind of advising on potential topics to be tackled potential guests to be invited into the panels. I put forward a number of names, people I knew, people I didn't, people I mostly admired. And one of them was a fantastic Kurdish Iraqi artist, Hiwa K, whose work I had seen in Documenta a few months before, and I was fascinated. He ended up winning the Documenta Prize that year, and with a public piece that was quite radical and quite kind and personal, which is something I'm interested in how sculptures and public art can move away from this troublesome historical connection with power, and move into being objects that actually give back to the city, that have allow for more intimate and like tender connections with the audience. Anyway, so I ended up sitting in a panel with this man whom I knew very little of, but deeply admire in terms of his work. And he turned out to be a fantastic human being who I'm still in contact with. That must have been 5-7 years ago, I don't know. And we're still in touch. He's a dear friend, fantastic artist, and like that speaks to how arts and culture and these institutions like help or like facilitate cross-cultural connections, and how these things go beyond the actual walls of the event or the talks, and
I find it fascinating. I've been very privileged to have done quite a few of these interviews now, and the way that it's interacted with your lives, the British Council, is quite considerable. If it's that connection, if it's that, like you said about the artist, those meaningful things. Do you think it's and you've done quite a lot of stuff with the British Council. That's been a part of your career, it seems like, those connections, those
mostly my personal practice. I as much as impossible it is to keep the professional life and the personal practice separate. They often overlap. So yes, at an extent, it's been part of. But I'm more. I see more the impact of the British Council in my personal practice as an artist. That has actually allowed me to execute this piece that I wouldn't have executed on my own, because it was a bit of a Sisyphean effort. It was literally pushing a big object up a dune and down, and so production wise it was a complicated piece, and it was a very tough piece to execute. It was a video piece that was a documentation of a performance action. And it's something that wouldn't have made sense at all for me to just go out in the desert and do that. The British Council basically created this platform for this artwork to make sense. I had that in mind, but you just don't go and build a 3 meter by 3 meter prop and just like pull it around in the sand for no reason. You need to have like a relevant reason to embark into this adventure, and you also need to have an audience to allow this action to have a life on its own. And with this series of exhibitions and shows, it just made sense to put all the energy into this thing, and it was really beautiful being able to realize this large scale piece and this massive undertaking, and also knowing that that was going to have these different platforms and was going to be read and understood from different perspectives, which was somewhat the whole point of the show. It's called The Place I Call Home, and that ties back to this idea of this very personal idea of me living here, a place that's not my birthplace, but that it feels like home, and how places in different, like people in different places will see this artwork and maybe reflect on that or something else. You know, like some people told me, because the piece is just me pulling this object into the water and disappearing into the water. People talk about, from their personal experiences, about the plight of refugees, like people venturing into the sea, or like migration of creatures, and not only humans, and like, you know, like, so, you know, like this thing kind of like created a series of narratives that I was not expecting.
It sounds like it had a major impact on your life at the time.
It was physically tiring, but yeah, it was a beautiful experience. It was a beautiful exercise, and it's an artwork I hold dearly. It's a beautiful piece. Like in my personal production, that has been, it's quite a highlight, I have to say.
I can see it. I've got one last question, which is a difficult one for me, because I've been thinking about so many words. But what one word would you say sums up the British Council?
I'm not a one word man.
This is the struggle that I have.
But I would say maybe connections, or maybe cross-pollination.
I said legacy. That's my word. They create legacies for themselves and for others.
I mean, these concepts are unavoidably connected.
I love it. Yeah.
Without connections, you cannot build a legacy. It doesn't build on its own.
I love your word. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks for celebrating the British Council.
It's been lovely.
It's been a lovely pleasure. Yeah.